What sparked your interest into journalism?
Um, I think it all stems from um, it's a lifetime of reading. Um, I ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to, I always wanted to write. I read all these great stories and things, and I wanted to write, but I didn't know that journalism would be the path to becoming a writer slash reporter. So I think, I started out as an artist. After I retired from the Air Force after 22 years, I thought I was going to go out and become a graphic designer, but fate had other intentions, and I ended up working for the school paper as an editorial cartoonist.
Okay.
But everybody around me, they were working on stories and they were working on deadline. And after sitting around talking to them and hearing their stories, um, I was intrigued. And then I wrote an essay, and one of the instructors, professors, said, "Hey, you have a knack for writing." And she said, "You write long. We can work with you on that." And the next semester after that, I started signing up for reporting classes. And through those reporting classes, I was introduced to editors at the Express News. And I started working at the Express News as an editorial assistant. And from there, started to freelance. And then the opportunities and the doors just opened up from there.
Nice. So since you've been here since 1999, how have you seen journalism? How have you seen San Antonio evolve over time?
Oh my gosh, it's as far as journalism, you know, um, when we started out, you had your notepad, your pen. Sometimes you had a micro tape recorder, and now all those things are gone because everything you need, you have your own office on your phone. You know, and you can do a multitude of things when you're out in the field. Um, like I started to take notes. I would start writing my story on my notes app in my cell
Mm-hmm.
phone. So instead of waiting to get back,
Yeah.
I could start actually in the field writing in real time. Also, it gave me the opportunity to take photographs that I could use when I got back to write the story. I could look at those photos for details, you know, and I can double check something. Was that car really a 1946 whatever versus getting it wrong? So I think that's been like a quantum leap for reporting since I started. And San Antonio is just, even though it's growing by leaps and bounds, it's still a place where it's almost like Cheers. Everybody knows your name. Not to that intimate a level, but you'd be surprised at the connections that you run into. So which has proved helpful
Mhm.
for me over the years.
Yeah. What's one of the earliest stories that you remember telling?
Oh my gosh. So um, one of the earliest stories I remember telling is well, there's two.
Okay.
There was one called Hatitude, and it's my first feature story, first freelance story I wrote for feature section. It was the black African American women in their church hats, and I mean, we worked on that story for about a month, just going out to different churches on Sundays. But it was about the more than just the appearance, but there was a legacy and tradition, rich tradition of these women, who wore these beautiful hats, church hats, and how they took care of them, and how for a lot of them it was just the crowning piece of their ensemble that they wore on Sundays after a week, of working and laboring very hard. Um, on Sunday was a day that they could, show their appreciation through their appearance and their faith, you know,
Yeah.
and belief in the Lord, which they gave all the glory to.
Absolutely. So stories like that, how do you find them? How are you, coming up with these pictures and ideas?
So I was very fortunate to have mentors that believed in. They believed that stories were not in the office; they're out around the city and the community. So we would go and make cold calls. I would go knock on doors, which I know everything now is you have to text ahead of time, you have to call ahead of time, but I was never intrusive, but I would show up at, people, the company's doors, and, sometimes they got freaked out. But 9 times out of 10, I would talk to the communication person and tell them what I was interested in and try and time it, tie it into something timely, a timely issue, like, the food bank and the issues that took place during COVID. Um, and then we would also go out and find stories around the city, which is it's a lost art. And I learned that from some of the old school editors. They were like, "Hey, man, you have a license to go out and find stories," and that's what we used to do. So, but it all depends on the. I think it depends on the reporter and what they believe a story is.
For sure.
You know, and I was never that captivated with just doing press release stories. You know, it's like a canned or formulaic. Where you basically can just go and fill in the blanks.
Yeah, there's no like personality.
Exactly. So Attitude was like that. And then um, we also did a story on a African American woman who was 106 years old. Her name was Julia Hoyle Gayton, and she was a progressive African American woman who was the first in her town in East Texas to buy um, a Model T, I believe, through the Sears and Roebuck catalog.
Oh,
They shipped it to her in parts and had it put together. You know, she talked about how she taught families in rural areas how to survive during the depression. Like how I remember she was telling me how they would take burlap sacks and take the dried corn husks and stuff it to make a pillow. You know, and how during World War II she had her home broken down and shipped by rail to San Antonio and then rebuilt on the east side. And she was a proud Republican because, for a lot of folks, they all, they wanted to belong to the party of Lincoln. This is before all the different changes that have gone on. But she actually attended the inauguration of Richard Nixon. And she was a teacher. She taught government. She's one of the few people that really scared me. Even at 106 years old, she would, she wasn't she was still mobile. She still walked, with the aid of a cane. But she would also, like a cat plays with a mouse, she would start asking me questions about the Senate and the Congress, and I'm like, I do not, But we that was one of our first long form stories that we did. We stayed with her over probably a 4 month period, and just did a documentary style, story. Sometimes we would stop in and wouldn't even, report anything, just to sit with her.
At what point over your career, maybe it could have been early or recent, where you realized, wow,
The work that I do actually matters to people.
That's a great question. So, um, there were, I guess, most recently, because as journalism has changed, and there's been a lot of uh, forward movement with information and stories moving online. Whereas before, when it was mainly print, we used to have centerpiece stories, human interest stories, and we still do them to a certain extent. But you know, those stories that there wasn't a measurement except through letters to the editor and things like that, or phone calls. Um, so when we went full steam ahead online, um, I guess it's about last year. I guess, and it was really fun, not funny, but I got snail mail, from just these people started writing about the column, because my column is about called San Antonio Stories, well, people of San Antonio plus personal experiences that I've had over my lifetime. You try to tie it into San Antonio because I was in the military,
Yeah.
and this is military city. But I got a email, a letter in the mail, and it wasn't sent to me. It was sent to my boss and to the editor. And he said, it was a woman. She said, "Hey, some along the lines of Vincent Davis is a unicorn. There's no one else to tell stories the way he does about people. Keep him at all costs."
Yeah.
So that to me was like, wow, handwritten letter. Um, and I don't think it's more as much as Vincent Davis writing. It's just that people still want to read stories. They want to, hear about other people, because they connect with the things that other people have experienced, things they're doing, things they stand for. And we're just that bridge. We're just sharing,
Absolutely.
you know.
So how does that make you feel? Like, knowing that people view you as such and knowing that you get to do this type of work.
Oh man, it's humbling and it's an honor, and I don't take it lightly. Not just me, but there's other folks here at the paper that also write in that same vein. But it's a responsibility, you represent the paper, but you also represent the people that you're writing about. And I've never, I had my mentors, they kind of taught me, you know, um, just tidbits and things that you should do to showcase somebody or tell your audience about this person. But then a lot of it also comes from the person I consider the main storyteller in my life. It's my great grandfather, Theodore H. Martin, who was a World War II veteran. Um, and so when they gave me the opportunity to write columns, I was like thinking, how would Granddaddy write this? You know, well, I can't write. I can write and try to. I can pursue it. I can pursue that angle that he would take. I'm thinking like, how would he write this? And if he was able to tell a story, he wouldn't be writing it. He'd be telling it. And just picture, and I always picture him in his overstuffed chair. He's got his T-shirt on. He's got his Sears slacks on, not pants, slacks. His hush puppies on, and he's got a Have a Tampa cigar. That was the name of it, Have a Tampa cigar. And he didn't have a clip. He would just bite the ends off and spit it on the floor. you know, you know. But the real deal, and he would tell these stories that just they would make your eyes tear up, or you'd just be falling out, rolling. But so that's what I'm chasing, to be able to tell these stories and share them with people the way that he would tell them. I mean, and it wasn't just family members. He had all old army buddies that would come by. There'd be church members, and he would just tell the stories, and you'd be like rolling your eyes, like, dude, come on,
Yeah.
But then the other ones, you'd be like, I'll be back because you know. So, and he had seen so much. Like I say, he was infantry, World War II, infantryman, and he's seen a lot. But he was very reticent to. He never talked about it. You would have to prompt. You have to, yeah, yeah. You have to. Yeah, exactly right. You'd have to go up to him and say, "Hey, what about this? What about that?" And when I was a kid, he would never talk about it. But when I joined the military, when I enlisted into the Air Force, I was a man in his eyes. So whenever I'd come back to see him for a couple of days, we'd sit out in the backyard drinking Heineken, bottles of Heineken, and he would tell me stuff, and he'd be like, "Whoa," you know. So
That's amazing.